They expected ruins. They expected starvation. They expected to see a country collapsing under the pressure of a global war. Instead, the German prisoners of war who arrived in the United States in 1943 stepped into a world that felt impossibly modern. A world that contradicted every word of a Nazi propaganda. Most of these men were veterans, soldiers of the Afrika Korps, Luftwaffe mechanics, infantry from Sicily and Tunisia. They boarded American ships believing the United States was immature, divided, racially unstable, and incapable of sustaining a long war. They were taught that American democracy bred weakness, that capitalism caused chaos, that the entire nation was barely held together. But within minutes of reaching American soil, their worldview began to fracture. The trains transporting them inland stretched for what looked like entire kilometers. Huge locomotives pulled steel carriages effortlessly across landscapes wider than some German regions. The guards escorting them were confident, casual, well-fed, nothing like exhausted. Wehrmacht troops burned out by years of fighting powwows silently watched the passing landscape, trying to reconcile what they were seeing with the image of a weak America. Then came the night. German soldiers fully expected blackout conditions in Europe. Darkness meant safety from bombers. But as the pyro trains rolled across the American heartland, they saw something that left them speechless. Fully illuminated towns glowing like constellations, neon signs, floodlit streets, restaurants open at midnight, factories operating in bright light. A POW from the Afrika Korps later wrote, "When we saw American cities shining as if the war did not exist, we realized Germany had not told us the truth." The next shock came from the land itself. Stretching outward in every direction were enormous farms, agricultural empires powered by machinery that dwarfed anything in Europe. Tractors with engines stronger than German transport vehicles moved effortlessly across endless rows of crops. Massive irrigation systems rotated like futuristic machines for many POWs raised in small farming villages. The scale was overwhelming. Arrival at the camps only deepened the confusion. Instead of punishment barracks, they found organized compounds with medical stations, libraries, sports fields, workshops, classrooms, newspapers, and dining halls serving meals superior to those issued to German troops at the front. It was not luxury, but it was humane, stable, and structured. And the soldiers raised under authoritarian rule. The most shocking detail was this. The guards didn't fear their own government. They didn't whisper. They didn't police speech. They simply did their jobs. It was the first crack in their worldview, and the beginning of a transformation none of them expected.
If arrival was the first shock, the American work program was the earthquake. Under the Geneva Convention, POWs could work in non-military sectors. America used this not for exploitation, but to fill labor shortages caused by millions of men fighting overseas. German POWs were assigned to farms, orchards, sawmills, canneries, construction crews, and municipal projects. They earned wages, small by American standards, but astonishing to men raised under strict wartime rationing. And it wasn't the money that broke their worldview. It was the treatment. Farmers handed them cold lemonade during breaks. Children waved at them as they passed. Churches invited them to Christmas dinners. Factory workers exchanged jokes or cigarettes with them. Some families near the camps intentionally left pies on fences where powwows marched by. For men raised inside militarism and brutality, this was disarming.
The more they observed, the more the myth of American degeneracy collapsed. They saw ordinary workers living in houses larger than German officer villas. They saw families driving cars, owning radios, refrigerators, electric stoves, lichers, oh, what's unimaginable in Germany. They saw clothing stores full of choices even during wartime shortages. A POW diary entry from Camp McCoy reads, "In Germany, only the elite lived like this. In America, the worker lives like a king." But the most devastating contrast came from food. Germany rationed everything: bread, meat, fat, sugar. In America, even during wartime, cafeterias served hearty meals. POWs received balanced diets that exceeded what their own soldiers were getting on the front lines. This abundance wasn't propaganda. It was visible everywhere. On farms, POWs witnessed mechanized agriculture producing more in a month than entire German districts could in a year. They watched massive combined harvest in fields that stretched beyond the horizon. They worked alongside farmers who used machines the German army would have considered valuable military assets. One prisoner later said, "The farms frightened us more than the weapons. If America could feed itself so easily, then Germany could never starve it." By late 1944, guards reported an unusual pattern. Less hostility, more curiosity, fewer escape attempts, more conversation, more requests for books, dictionaries, newspapers. POWs were no longer thinking like soldiers, they were thinking like observers studying a different civilization, a civilization that contradicted everything they had been taught.
While abundance shattered their expectations, freedom shattered their ideology. Inside the POW camps, German soldiers encountered something almost unimaginable: uncensored information. Camp libraries stocked newspapers that criticized the American government, questioned military leadership, and debated policies openly. When POWs watched newsreels, they saw journalists challenge officials, something that would have led to imprisonment in Germany. They witnessed heated arguments among Americans in cafes, on trains, in break rooms. People disagreed openly, without fear, without surveillance. This contradicted everything they had been taught about democracy being chaotic, unstable, or weak. One POW summarized the experience. "We were told democracy meant disorder, but here, order came from freedom." In the camps, prisoners created orchestras, theater groups, reading circles, art workshops, and even universities where volunteers taught mathematics, philosophy, languages, and engineering, and Americans allowed it, sometimes even provided materials. All of this eroded an Nazi ideology at its roots. It's an industrial shock. The realization that America's war effort was bigger than the entire Axis combined. POWs assigned to factories witnessed production scales they could barely comprehend. Assembly lines producing bombers non-stop, mountains of steel, rubber and copper, automated machines performing tasks teams of Germans required hours to complete, workers who weren't exhausted or terrified but motivated and proud. A report by a former Wehrmacht officer describes his reaction after touring a U.S. plant. In one warehouse, I saw more aluminum than the Third Reich had access to in an entire year. Others witnessed logistics that ran at a pace the German rail system could never achieve. Trains loaded with grain, fuel, tanks, aircraft parts, moving across the country like clockwork. Then came the most crushing measure. America was fighting at full power without rationing its population into misery. While German families lived in fear and shortages, Americans were eating steak, buying appliances, going to the movies, and turning cities into dazzling arrays of light during wartime. This broke POW ideology more effectively than any propaganda. Many began writing letters home describing what they saw, letters that German censors tried desperately to intercept. Some prisoners openly stated that Germany had lied to them their entire lives. By 1945, the transformation was clear. They no longer believed the Reich. They no longer believed the propaganda. They no longer believed in the myth of German superiority. They were becoming something new. Men with a different vision of the world.
By the end of the war, German POWs in the United States had undergone one of the most profound ideological transformations in modern history. They arrived as loyal soldiers of a totalitarian regime. They left as witnesses to a society that contradicted everything they once believed. When the camps began to empty in 1946 and prisoners boarded ships back to Europe, many felt a deep, unexpected sadness. They were returning to a Germany in ruins, bombed cities, hunger, political chaos, while leaving behind a country that had shown them stability, fairness, and human dignity. For the first time, they compared two futures. One built on fear and obedience. One built on opportunity and openness. And the contrast was impossible to ignore. Back in Germany, these former POWs became a quiet but powerful force in rebuilding the nation. They became teachers, engineers, journalists, mayors, businessmen, even political leaders. Some joined the effort to construct a democratic Germany. Others helped write local constitutions. Several became influential voices in the formation of the new West German state. Walter Hallstein, once a German soldier, later a POW, rose to become the first president of the European Commission. Historians call this phenomenon the POW effect, the idea that Germany's transformation after World War II was shaped not only by militant defeat, but by thousands of men returning with a different understanding of freedom. One former POW wrote decades later, "America conquered us without cruelty. And that is why it conquered our hearts." The camps closed. The fences came down, the lights faded from the guard towers. But the ideas remained. Ideas about democracy, ideas about humanity, ideas about prosperity, ideas about a society that didn't need tyranny to function. And so, a war that began with tanks, bombs, and ideology ended with something far more powerful. A blueprint for a better world. This is the forgotten chapter of World War II, the story of how the United States defeated an enemy not just on the battlefield, but in the mind. A victory won not through force, but through example.